Welcome back to the ENCA Corruption Scorecard. We now get into our panel discussion. I'm joined by author Jacques Pauw and also joined by Gareth Newham to talk about the developments at the various intelligence agencies over the last few years. Jacques, you wrote this comprehensive piece of work, the President's Keepers. And I remember the drama that it caused at the time, particularly in as far as the allegations it was making about the then President, Jacob Zuma. But within these pages, there are these detailed allegations and your reporting on some of the work that has been done around investigations at the intelligence agencies, particularly relating to the use and abuse of funds. Nothing seems to have happened, unless I'm missing it. Have you seen any action since then?
Very little has happened. And you know, when I published the book, it was allegations. And I think much of it has now been confirmed in evidence before the Zondo Commission. It is a fact that the PAN project at State Security wasted R1 billion of taxpayers' money. It's a fact that up to 10 million rand at one time was delivered to the State Security Agency. Much of that money went missing. There's evidence that the PAN project meant nothing. It was of no value to the State Security Agency. Now, what happened is Mr. Fraser left the State Security Agency in 2011 under a cloud. When the reports started coming out, the internal forensic reports came out about the extent of PAN. He left, he resigned. Went into private practice. He set up a company, got enormous state contracts, and was suddenly then reappointed in 2016 as the Director General of the State Security Agency, with this cloud hanging over him. And remember, in one of the reports, it is said that he might even be guilty of treason. Yet he was appointed. We know today why he was appointed. If you read the Mufamadi panel report, which was instigated by President Ramaphosa, is that the Special Operations Unit at the State Security Agency, and many of the PAN agents went into the SOU, was a personal political tool for the former president.
Yeah.
Nobody has been brought to book. All those top officials that were appointed by Arthur Fraser are still in the State Security Agency. He was removed. The second layer of management wasn't removed. Exactly the same happened in police crime intelligence.
Right. So the report of the minister, of course, when I spoke to her in January, Ayanda Dlodlo, was that there have been a number of disciplinary matters that had been taking place, and she was explaining some kind of legalistic process whereby people are appealing against those disciplinary processes, etc.
And those appeals can take years.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know that.
So, Jacques, paint a picture, before I bring in Gareth Newham into this conversation, paint a picture for me, for a South African who says, my goodness, I'm already, being hit by this avalanche of allegations of corruption. Some of it is more vividly demonstrable, right? We can go to the Free State, as our team has done, and show that these are the asbestos roofs that were meant to be removed because they're dangerous. They cause asbestosis and TB and other illnesses, but they're still here after you spent 255 million rand and people bought cars. To someone who doesn't get how the South African taxpayer, the ordinary men and women of South Africa, hardworking as they are, were prejudiced by what happened in state security. For someone who says, well, I mean, they're spies, they need resources.
I agree with you.
I understand. What would you say?
The answer is very simple. We have state capture as a result of the failure of the intelligence services. The fact that the Guptas looted the state-owned enterprises, the fact that significant parts of the state was captured, is a result of the failure of the intelligence services. You must remember, in 2011, the former heads of the State Security Agency, Gibson Jenje, Moshe, they instigated an investigation into the role of the Guptas. They were stopped. SARS started with an investigation into money laundering and the Guptas. In 2013, they were stopped. What we're seeing today is a result of the failure of the intelligence services. The State Security Agency is supposed to protect the integrity of the state. The state was looted. The former president was jeopardized. And that is the result of the failure of the intelligence services.
All right, let me bring in Gareth Newham into this conversation. Gareth, I'll start by posing the same question that I just posed to Jacques Pauw just now, to say, you know, there are these reports and there's various investigations into the happenings at the State Security Agency and other, intelligence agencies such as crime intelligence. But for someone who doesn't get what's at stake here, what was at stake in as far as the financial corruption at these agencies, and how does it translate when it comes to the strength or otherwise of our intelligence agencies?
Well, I think the important point to make is that state capture didn't just cost the country economically. There have been estimates of almost 1.5 trillion rands being wasted that could otherwise have been used to build houses, provide better infrastructure, jobs, reduce poverty, that kind of thing. It also cost lives. The crime intelligence, police crime intelligence that was compromised as a result of state capture and the role of former head Richard Mdluli, meant that the police were not able to get on top of a growing problem of organized violent crime. And the consequence was very clear. From 2012 up to last year, the murder rate has gone up by 37%, which translates into around 5,500 more murders last year than was the case 8 years ago. In that same period of 8 years, there are now 43,000 more armed attacks last year than there were 8 years ago. So in 2012, there were 100,000 armed attacks, armed robberies, most of them street robberies, but many in homes, businesses, car hijackings, reported to the police. Last year, it was 143,000. Those crimes can be policed down if crime intelligence is effective, if it's doing its job. And to remember that we have a large crime intelligence capacity in the South African Police Service. They get about 4.4 billion rand at the moment annually, and there are almost 9,000 officials in crime intelligence. So we have the resources and the people, but because of the political interference and the misuse of this capacity in the interests of the former president and his cabal, South Africans are far more likely to be attacked and murdered today than they were 8 years ago as a result of this.
Yeah, just to take that point a bit further then, Gareth, if I stick with you for a moment, I'm just thinking about the current, security issues, for example, and thinking to myself, I'm not sure if we have an intelligence agency that's on top of things in as far as the insurgency in Mozambique, just at our doorstep here at the moment, whether they're on top of that situation, cybersecurity, the recent attacks we saw at a number of entities in the country. I don't know if they are up to the task, simply because what started out as a good idea, get a principal agent network to expand your covert gathering capabilities, was so corrupted that it pretty much amounts to nothing now, right, Gareth?
Well, look, I think I'm more focused on police crime intelligence than the State Security Agency, but certainly 2 years ago, with the appointment of the current head, Peter Jacques, there have been attempts to restructure and improve the capacity. So you're right, it got decimated under Richard Mdluli. Most of the crime intelligence capacity was going to waste. It wasn't achieving very much. But there has been a lot of work behind the scenes over the last couple of years to try and improve that capacity. And so if you start looking at the number of network operations, proactive covert gatherings and stuff like that, they're growing quite substantially. So last year, for example, there were 80,000 covert operations to gather information about criminal networks, which led to about 48,000 active police units getting engaged. So it's not that the capacity has been completely, or is still completely decimated, certainly not in crime intelligence. There's a lot going on that it is slowly improving, but it does take a long time. So we're still suffering from a far greater shortage and problem with dealing with complex organized crimes and complex crimes such as cybercrime than we would otherwise have been had we not had state capture. If there had been an improvement over that last 8 years with hiring the right people, Richard Mdluli brought many people into that agency that didn't have the right skills or capacity or intent. If they're buying the right technology, if they're using that appropriately, we'd be a much safer, much more robust country than we are today. So in terms of foreign intelligence, obviously you're talking about Mozambique, Northern Mozambique. That is something that needs to be closely monitored, because if South Africa, as part of a regional effort, does ever get involved, it could mean that we become a target, or targets are taken out in South Africa by sympathizers to those groups.
Sure.
So it is critically important that this capacity is strengthened and is only utilized for its intended purposes.
Jacques, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think a major problem is that there are so many acting positions at the moment. The Director General of State Security is acting. The head of the Internal Security is acting. I think it was a brilliant appointment to make
Robert
McBride the head of the foreign section.
Yeah.
Certainly, I think he's going to catch up with the insurgency in Mozambique. But it's very difficult, and I mean, I know the minister is in a difficult position. She has instituted some disciplinary hearings. There are huge delays. We know how difficult it is to get rid of a corrupt official. We're seeing it in the NPA. We're seeing it in the Hawks. So unfortunately, more than 2.5 years, nearly 3 years after Fraser had left, they haven't been able to stabilize the State Security Agency. We're not seeing, it is still ludicrous that you are, for example, not allowed to know how many people work at State Security. You're not allowed to know what the budget is. We had the Mufamadi panel report, which actually recommends that state security should move into a more civilian kind of capacity. Open the agency up. Let's discuss their budget. Why does the
Auditor General,
yeah, still not have access to the secret funds of the State Security Agency?
So on that point, I've got to say, Jacques, that I reached out to the chairperson of the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence, Jerome Make, and part of what he told me, he wouldn't come on the show, but said they have been doing oversight in the last few weeks, and basically they are consolidating their report, and they will release a report that has to do with their oversight. I have no idea how extensive this particular oversight goes. Were they able to look at specific program areas inside the budgets, etc., etc.? Because at the end of the day, part of what the Mufamadi panel found was that there was that shift, right, from national security to state security, from protecting and reflecting the resolve of South Africans, as I alluded to that quote in our constitution, to being secretive and more security oriented than was originally envisaged in the constitution.
This parliamentary report that you're talking about by the Oversight Committee, they're supposed to do it on a yearly basis. They present their reports, which they failed to do many years when Zuma was president. Those reports mean very, very little, because it doesn't give you an insight into what's happening at state security. Every member of parliament who sits on the committee needs a security clearance. They're not even allowed to have their phones in the room. They can make little notes. They're not allowed to talk about it. We need to know what state security is doing. We need to know that they're busy with bona fide intelligence work. And it's not a case like before where bags of money get dumped at the Special Operations Unit and we don't know what happens to it.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Gareth, I will start with you, and we'll be talking about the oversight systems that are already there, the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence and the Inspector General of Intelligence. Jacques, I know you've been quite critical of the previous IGI, Inspector General of Intelligence. There's a new one in place now. Well, not so new anymore, but we'll see what work has been done by that office. Stay with us. We continue with our discussion here on the ENCA Corruption Scorecard.